Welcome to episode 124 of 10 Minute Record Reviews. And this time I'm going to talk about the O'Jays' 1973 album on Columbia, but also on Philadelphia International Records, Ship Ahoy. And what I have here is the first Canadian pressing of this album, a Unipack sleeve with the fantastic interior photograph of the three members of the O'Jays staring out meaningfully across the ocean because, of course, as the cover art indicates, this album is at least in part about the history of slavery in the United States. This album is a prime example of the emerging Philadelphia soul sound from the early 1970s. This was a group which is very well known for their mid-70s dance numbers, but this is probably their most varied and artistically interesting album, along with its predecessor, Backstabbers. When discussing the story of this record, you kind of have to start with Kenny Gamble and Leon Huff. Gamble and Huff were this songwriting duo and production duo who, in the late 60s and early 70s, established Philadelphia International Records and eventually inherited the mantle of Motown as the leading exponents of black soul, black pop, and basically black commercial music in the United States. In the 1960s, they wrote or produced songs which were performed by the Supremes, the Temptations, Wilson Pickett, and a whole bunch of other artists. Gamble and Huff realized correctly that they had sufficient energy and talent to be able to do a lot more and achieve a lot more success than was available to them through their songwriting path. So in 1971, they began to shop around the idea of their own label. They got turned down by a few places, but Columbia picked up the idea, agreed to fund the project, and also agreed to distribute their records. What they did, and this is actually very similar to the Motown model, is create a whole factory, essentially, of soul music. They had in-house arrangers, they had in-house musicians whom they relied on exclusively to produce the backing material for the records they produced. They also typically wrote and arranged almost all of the songs their artists performed. In doing all this, they brought about a real evolution in the sound of soul music. Their primary innovations were reliance on much fatter, funkier beats and much lusher string orchestration. They encountered considerable success doing this, and by 1975, Philadelphia International Records and the Philadelphia sound in general had basically eclipsed the Motown sound with a few notable exceptions. Gamble and Huff at this point were the top soul producers in the country, and kind of reflective of their dominance was the fact that Soul Train, that great televised vehicle for black music, had as its theme song TSOP, The Sound of Philadelphia, which was done by MFSB, which was a house band in Philadelphia International. Gamble and Huff's music was ripping up dance floors all over the country, but it wasn't just about dance music. There was also lots of politically and socially conscious music, which they were writing, and this album is a prime example. Having talked about the production team, we should talk about the O'Jays themselves. The O'Jays were originally a five-man singing group from Canton, Ohio. The original members were Eddie Leverett, Walter Williams, William Powell, Bobby Massey, and Bill Isles. And these five guys had a modest career in the 1960s. They played straight-up R&B, never really cracked the top 40. Having been trudging in a straight line for about 15 years and never having really tasted much success, in the early 1970s, Massey and Isles basically said, look, we've had enough, and they left the group. And that left just three original members, Leverett, Williams, and Powell. These three guys decide to soldier on, and almost immediately their luck changes because Gamble and Huff, remember them, looking to staff their new label with a roster of artists, reach out to the O'Jays and sign them in 1972. Gamble and Huff left the singing to the O'Jays, but they took care of everything else. The writing of the songs, the production, the arranging, furnishing the backup musicians, and so on. The O'Jays' first album with Philadelphia International, Backstabbers, goes to number 10 on the charts, and it has a number 1 single, Love Train, and a number 3 single as well. And their fortunes have entirely shifted from where they were 12 months before. And on the heels of that success, they go into the studio to record Ship Ahoy. This album was made at Sigma Sound in Philadelphia in October 1973, and it's produced by Gamble and Huff, of course. The songs are for the most part written by Gamble and Huff themselves. There are 2 or 3 other songs which are written by some of the other in-house composers which Gamble and Huff employed. The O'Jays in the album perform as a trio of singers. The lead singing duties are typically handled by Eddie Leverett, with Powell and Williams providing backup and also a few lead highlights here and there. There are also a lot of session musicians on here within the Philadelphia International stable. There are no individual credits. The credit is given to MFSB, which was the in-house band, which stands for Take Your Choice, Mother, Father, Sister, Brother, which is a radio-friendly name of the band, or Motherfucking Son of a Bitch, which was the kind of informal name of the group. Over the years, MFSB had about 30 members that came and went. It's kind of hard to know who actually played in this album, but we do know a few people. Anthony Jackson is on bass, and he has a key role to play in this record. Leon Brooks is on keys, and Rico Bene is a trumpet player. Beyond this is a whole collective on strings and horns and other instrumentation, the same collective that would play for the 3 Degrees, the Tramps, Teddy Pendergrass, and a whole bunch of other musicians. As I mentioned, this is a very varied album. There are political songs, there's songs about the black community as it's kind of an internal dialogue. There's a song about slavery, there's a song about the environment, there are love songs of a variety of different flavors. It's a super interesting album to listen to, actually. And it starts off with a very gospel-y number entitled, appropriately, Put Your Hands Together. And here the OJs are really taking the listener to church. This is upbeat gospel soul, upbeat not just in rhythm but also in mood. It's about a better day coming. The arrangement I think is fantastic. It's done by Bobby Martin. There's strings, there's horns, backup singing. Everything is nicely orchestrated. This is a very, very slick production, and you can see at this point that Gamble and Huff just had their machinery absolutely ticking over. That's followed by the title track, which is a very moving track, kind of a haunting track. It's a song about the so-called Middle Passage, the journey from Africa to America from the perspective of the slaves in the ship. And you have the sound effects of the waves crashing, of ropes creaking, of whips cracking, and it's a direct treatment of this topic of this voyage to enslavement, which is a lot starker than a lot of artists had ever tried, certainly up to this point. And Bobby Martin does a phenomenal job of arranging this tune because the lyrics obviously are of a heavy, if not the heaviest subject, and he has to do the epic theme of all this justice, and he absolutely does. Next song is another change of pace, which is The Air I Breathe, which is a song, as it would sound, about air quality and pollution and the failure of people to take this seriously and the failure of people to act to preserve the air. So it's very much of a piece with Marvin Gaye's Mercy, Mercy Me, the ecology. It's an environmental tune. And so, again, something that you wouldn't necessarily would fit on a soul record, and yet Gamble and Huff are there to say, absolutely this belongs in a soul record. Absolutely a soul record can be full of great music and hard-hitting messages, and they achieve both those things. The last song on side one is by Bunny Siegler, one of those in-house composers I mentioned, called You've Got Your Hooks in Me. Pretty good song. One too many fishing metaphors for my taste, but still not enough to say this is in any way weak or drags the album down, because it doesn't, and the performances are excellent. Side two starts with For the Love of Money. It starts with some unusual backwards echo effects, and then this famous bass line by Anthony Jackson. The lyrics are all about the evils of money, how it leads to corruption and vice and violence and all the rest of it. It's got a very, I think it is actually in a minor key. It has almost a sense of anxiety that kind of runs through this song. It's a complicated song. It isn't just a sort of a feel-good, shake-it-on-down tune. It's definitely got some substance to it, and it's definitely got a range of emotions that play out. That's followed by Now That We've Found Love, which of course is a song which has since been made famous by a whole bunch of other people who have covered it. A classic tune with a wonderful melody line and beautiful ensemble singing by the OJs. The second last song is a major classic in its own right, Don't Call Me Brother, and this is an extended rap or riff on relationships within the black community. And in this song, the singers are basically calling out people who are aligning themselves with the imagery and the ideas and the speech patterns and the symbols of the Black Power movement, but are acting in ways themselves which actually damage the black community. And it's delivered with so much passion, you have no doubt for a second that the emotions here are completely real. The last song is People Keep Telling Me, which, just like the last song on the first side, is about a love affair, which is maybe not the best choice, but the protagonist is not about to be told no. Pretty good song and a great way to close out the album. This album may have more emotional and thematic range than any other album I can think of. Musically, it's diverse and polished. The singing by the group themselves, the OJs, is excellent, but you also have that whole full Philadelphia International ensemble, the production, the writing, the backup singing, all of it, the arranging. What's great about all of this is despite all of that slickness, it does not seem overproduced, and that's important because the nature of these songs means that the emotion has to come through. It falls a little bit short of Marvin Gaye's What's Going On, you have to say, but it's in the same category and in the same lane. It's an album full of anger and emotion that is still at the same time very sweet to the ear. It's a funk soul classic, and for me it's 4.5 out of 5 stars.